When was the last time you had any exchange of any kind with Eddie or Alex?
You know what? This is pretty interesting, Eddie. There's a mutual friend of Alex's and mine. His name's Craig DeFalco, and this is a guy who was a tech for me for a while, and he actually was Eddie's tech. I don't know if it was the 2007 tour, but he teched for him one of the tours, and he stays in touch with Alex, basically. And I got a relatively new place out here at the beach in Southern California, and this guy, Craig, he had never seen my house, so he came out. He was on tour with Lenny Kravitz or someone doing tech and had a break. And so we went out on my boat. I'm like, we'll cruise you around the bay and check, you can check the place out. And so, as it goes, I had a couple of cocktails, and next thing you know, we're talking about the band and the good old days and all that stuff. Because he did, I think at least 2-3 Van Halen tours with me back in the 80s. And so we're talking, next thing you know, I've got him holding his iPhone up, and I'm shooting a video going, hey, Alex, man, just talking about the good times and everything that's going on now. God, all these heroes of ours, people we grew up listening to, they're like starting to drop left and right now. It's like, oh my God.
Right.
And so later on, we're at my house, my buddy and myself, Craig, and his phone rings, and it was Alex. And he's all, hey, tell Mike I said hi. Next thing I know, he's handing me the phone and goes, here, Al wants to talk to you. And I'm like, what? And this is this past May. And I hadn't spoken to Alex in like 10 years, I think, 10, 11 years. And, nothing heavy. I didn't want to get into anything about the band, but, it was just great to talk to him. We talked for about 20 minutes and had a great conversation just about life in general and getting older and what's going on around us in the music industry, And it was actually really great talking to him.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of bands in my decades in this business that have had divisions and issues and what have you. And then, whenever they inevitably connect, whether it's on the phone or get in the same room or see each other, there's this, no matter what's happened, it seems like there's this brotherhood that comes back because you guys, the four of you guys, you created...
No. Van Halen's the exception, Eddie. You forgot when we went out with Dave and did the presentation at the MTV Music Awards.
Right. Yeah, right.
It was all brotherly love until Dave and Ed almost went to blows after that one. Oh, my God.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, because Roth, he was pretty much thinking the whole night was going to be about him. And Eddie just wanted to answer questions. This is all the big press junket you do after, we present the award, you go through all the press stuff. You know how all that goes. And Roth just wanted the show, all the press to be about him, and Eddie's going, hey, this is before he had his hip surgery. He's going, hey, no, this is what's happening. We're doing a step at a time. I'm going to do, and, man, all of a sudden, the next thing I know, our security guy was like, arms outstretched, Dave on one side, Ed cocked, ready to go on the other side. And I'm going, oh, shit, get me the first flight tomorrow morning, get the hell out of here. It was like, oh, my God. It was something that could have been great. And, this was Roth. It was all Roth, because people thought it was staged and whatever. And even Roth thought that we were duping him because right after that is when we announced Gary Sharon being in the band.
Right.
And it wasn't that at all, and MTV they basically wanted Eddie and Dave just to present. And Ed said, no, if I'm going to come, I want the whole band to be there. I want Alex and Michael there, too.
Right.
So that was pretty interesting. But anyway, get back to your story about brotherly love.
Yeah, so much for that. Well, you just shot it in the foot. It applies to everybody but Van Halen.
Van Halen was probably the exception. But, when you talk about that, it's great that some bands can do that. But, you look now, like the other week, they announced all the new nominees for possible induction in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame next year, right?
Yeah. We talked about it the other day, yeah. Instead
of it all being brotherly love, all I'm reading on the internet is, okay, what's the drama that's going to go down now between Journey and, and this and that? And it kind of sucks because I think, was it Metallica? Or there were a couple bands that I saw that went out there. I think it was Metallica when they were inducted, that everybody came out. Or maybe I'm thinking of a different band.
Metallica did.
There are other bands that everybody comes out and it's great. And when Van Halen was inducted, I thought for sure Roth would be sleeping on the front steps of the Waldorf there before the show.
And of course, it ended up the only two guys that were there for the induction were you and Sammy, who were both out of the band at the time.
Exactly. Now, come on. What about that? And I had actually spoken with Roth's manager. He called me about a week before the induction, and he goes, "Hey, you know, are you cool with Dave and all that stuff?" I said, "Hey, you know what? This is one of those things where whatever is going on, we can just put it aside for one evening, and I'll do a shot of Jack with him, and we'll get up on stage and jam. It'll be a beautiful thing, and then everybody can, you know, retreat back to their corner of the ring, I guess, you know." And it was interesting when I found out what happened because, you know, Eddie wasn't going to be there because he was in rehab, supposedly, you know. And then Alex, of course, couldn't be there because he had to support his brother, supposedly.
Right.
And then the next thing I know, it's sound check for the induction. I'm talking to Slash, and Slash goes, "I can't believe it, man. Roth, you wanted to do Jump, and I told him about 10 times we can't do Jump. You know, it's heavy keyboard. Let's do anything else, whatever you want to do." And I guess Roth just really got heated up because, I don't know, he couldn't steal the show with Jump or whatever. And Slash said he was scratching his head. He couldn't understand it. And yeah, so Sammy and I were the only two that showed up, and it sucked. It was so bittersweet because, you know, it's one of those things where my whole family came in, my wife and my daughters, and, you know, and I'm like, God, this should be just a great night. And I remember sitting there next to Hagar at the table, and we're watching REM play, and I leaned over to Sam and I said, God, you know what? If we all could have been here, we would have kicked ass like something that would not have been forgotten for many years. And it was really sad. It was really sad, you know. And, you know, you got everyone. I'm up there giving my little acceptance speech, and I'm looking on one side of the room. There's Keith Richards, and I'm looking the other side. There's John McEnroe, and everybody in between that. And I'm going, man, this is the greatest thing ever. And I couldn't understand why those guys just would not want to be there for
You
that.
know, there's so many examples of bands that go in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame the right way and bands that just butcher it. And I mean, I was just talking to Rick Nielsen from Cheap Trick the other day. They're a prime example of a band that did it the right way last year because they were in a lawsuit with their drummer, Bunny Carlos, and all that. But you know what? For the fans, they went up there, they played 3-4 songs with Bunny, they put a nice smile on it, they did the right thing, and that was it. Then a couple of years ago, when Kiss finally went in, who I lobbied for hard, and two of the guys, Ace and Peter, I'm close with in Kiss, the Hall only put the original 4 guys in. They wanted those guys to play. Gene and Paul wouldn't play with them, and it was just this shit show of bickering leading up to it, and then they didn't play at all. And I thought the same thing. I was just like, man, here I am in this you know, that Rock and Roll Hall of Fame room can be kind of stuffy, and you know, and have a big bombastic rock band, whether it be Van Halen or Kiss or whatever, get up there and just shake the rafters, man. It would have been such an enema in that place, and they dropped the ball to be able to do it.
Yeah, exactly. Because, like you said, it can be stuffy, and I've seen it be stuffy. You know, the stuff what you watch on TV and whatever, what they edit it down to, because you know people can get up there and talk for an hour.
Oh, it's a 4-hour ordeal. Yeah. Yeah,
exactly. And so it's like you said, with a band like Kiss or Van Halen or whatever, to just go in. And by the way, yeah, I loved Cheap Trick. I think they were probably about the best. You know, same thing with Deep Purple. I grew up listening to Deep Purple. They were one of my favorite bands ever. That's when I started doing my scream, Ian Gillan. I'm like, oh, I'm going to scream just like that guy. And
but Blackmore didn't show up.
It was great to watch them play, but you know, and then they got their whole thing with Blackmore, and you know, of course, rest in peace, John Lord, one of the greatest rock keyboardists ever lived.
Yeah, well, if those idiots at the Hall of Fame didn't wait on putting Deep Purple in and pass over him for 25 years, Lord would have been there. It was ludicrous. Hey, I've got to do a quick break. Can you hold through the break? There's a few things I wanted to ask you about.
Yeah, sounds good, Eddie. I'll hold on for you.
All right, I appreciate that, Michael. Well, great way to wrap up the first week in the existence of this brand new Sirius XM channel volume and the Daily Trunk Nation, live every Monday through Friday, 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern, talking to the great Michael Anthony Van Halen for a bit here on this Friday.
Best way to end the week.
Yeah, what a way, man. Well, if you're only here, we could open up a couple shots and really break into the weekend, Michael. That would be the way to do it.
Oh, my God. We'll do a couple shots of my hot sauce. That'll start your weekend off.
Well, listen, we're going to get to your hot sauce in a second because I truly have told a lot of people about it, and I truly, truly do love your hot sauce. But picking up where we left off real quick, a few other things I wanted to ask you about Van Halen. What was interesting about that whole thing when Sammy lashed out in the video to Eddie and all that is then what happened shortly afterwards, which touched off a lot of people starting to think that there could be the potential for a reunion and it seemed like a very innocent thing, but a lot of people read a lot into it, that on Twitter, I'm sure you heard about this, Sammy and Eddie had a friendly exchange. They wished each other happy birthdays or something. Did you catch any of that?
Well, I do have kind of a personal spin on that one, Eddie. I don't know if I should tell you about it because I don't want to kill anybody's hopes or anything, because actually before Sammy did that, he told me we were on his jet flying somewhere to do a gig, and he goes, damn it, I'm going to wish Eddie happy birthday. I said, go ahead, man. I mean, come on, and so he did, and then I guess Eddie responded back.
Yes, yeah.
He said, I hope you're doing well, and he said, yeah, Sammy, I hope you're doing well also.
Right.
Well, see, the only thing that I was thinking that seemed kind of odd, in all the years that Sammy was in Van Halen and that I had been around him and Eddie never calls him Sammy, always call him Sam.
So you think somebody else was doing the social media?
Eddie's wife is a publicist.
Right.
I don't know. I mean,
well, I know
one
this.
Thing I don't know, but you know what? But it was a nice, friendly gesture. And Sammy has also said, I'm sure you've seen. There's been a couple other interviews that he's done where he says, "I'm sorry, I apologize to the Van Halen brothers and whatever." And because all this lashing out and whatever. And Sammy, and I love Sam to death, but sometimes he puts his foot in his mouth, and especially when it comes to rebuttals to stuff that people say or accuse him of, or Van Halen stuff. The worst thing Sammy can ever do is read shit that people say about him and Van Halen.
Right.
Because it does get him fired up. But Sammy has taken a turn now, and he does realize, he goes, hey, you know what? Even if I never play in a band with these guys again, friendship and, as human beings or whatever is more important to me than that. And, he says, he doesn't want to go to the grave with any enemies, so I don't know.
Well, I know, and he reached out to me because he was hot about this whole thing about with the Circle not being able to play Van Halen songs on TV, and he did an interview with me really hammering it. And then he left me a message, which again is private, and I'm not going to talk about it on the air because it was off the air. But he left me a message about some stuff with Van Halen that he wanted me to possibly help him out with as far as something with an interview down the line. So, I think that I think you're right. I think that maybe, but I'll tell you, nobody knows what's going on with Van Halen. If Roth is even still in the band, they're so cryptic. We don't know what's going on. So. I want to touch on that. I want to touch on your hot sauce. I want to touch on chicken foot and a little bit on the Circle. If you can give me like 10, 15 more minutes, Michael, we just got to do this quick break and we'll come back and pick it up there.
You got it.
Thank you, buddy. I appreciate it. We'll be right back with more of Michael Anthony, Trunk Nation on Volume. The Sirius XM headquarters, Trunk Nation, live Monday to Friday, 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern, 11 a to 1 p. Pacific. A week from Monday, Halloween, the 31st, I'll be doing this show live for a week from Los Angeles, where we are talking now with Michael Anthony of Van Halen. So, Michael, as far as the Van Halen stuff is concerned, where do you see any hope at all for any sort of reunion with yourself and the band? Do you have any interest in it? Do you have any desire? Do you feel there's unfinished business there, or are you over it?
You know what? In some ways, I'm kind of over it, only because, you can only hold your breath for so long. But it's kind of interesting that you say, any unfinished business. It's like, Van Halen being one of the biggest bands there ever was, it's kind of sad to see how everything kind of dwindled down like it did, kind of with a whimper, which this band, if we were going to go out, should have gone out like just killing it all over the world. And, I'm always that never say never guy. If the circumstances were right, I have no problem. I mean, I love going out and playing the music. And, you know, if we did it, though, it would have to be, you know, none of this 4 separate planes and 4 separate this and that, and you only see them on stage. You know, it's got to be kind of like, you know, not. I don't know if it can ever be like a brotherhood like it was before. You know, we used to call it, when Sam was in the band, we used to call ourselves the Four-Headed Monster. But if everybody could get along great, I think it'd just be great to do it for the fans. You know, and as far as Dave goes, I don't know if you know, obviously it would have been great to be on stage with Dave again, because I always liked his silliness on stage anyway.
Well, yeah, well that became well, that
in a way it's kind of comical, you know, but it always made for an interesting show.
Yeah, well, that lies. That's the other question in all of it, is the fact that you now have these 2 factions of Van Halen world. I'm a fan of both. I look at the Hagar and Roth versions of Van Halen as both great bands, but very different bands. To me,
Right.
they're kind of 2 different bands. But for a lot of people who are younger than myself, especially, the Hagar Van Halen is their Van Halen. And I've said this many times. The period of time you guys made records with Sammy, it's not like there was just, maybe one hit and it was kind of a little bit of an anomaly. There's like a dozen huge songs that are outside of the circle playing them, are literally on the shelf, never to be heard live again, of a whole generation's Van Halen.
You'll hear the older Van Halen fans that are, you know, like my age, that grew up with the band, obviously not liking any of Sammy's stuff, because, you know, people go, well, yeah, you know, they still kind of rock, but they became more commercialized and whatever, and which, you know, I don't think we did. You know, obviously they were playing, you know, we had our you know, #1 albums with Sammy and whatever, but I think we were rocking just as hard as with Dave. You know, and you know, you can't be 20 years old your whole life.
Right, and if people really look, if people really look at it,
Daniels like I used to.
but if people really look at it, Michael, people that say that, they forget. Like, look what started to happen around the time of 1984 when Roth was still in the band. That album in particular, there's the big introduction of keyboards with Jump
Right.
and I'll Wait. So there was already signs of the band taking a little bit more of a melodic turn, even with Roth. And I think when Sammy came in with his ability as a singer, it just brought a little bit more of that element in. But you still had songs like Pound Cake and Judgment Day and Get Up and all this stuff that was, you know, good enough, that rocked as hard as anything. So people that say that, they don't really have, I don't think, a full understanding of the catalog, and maybe where Van Halen would have went anyway if Roth had even stayed.
Exactly. You know, that's one of those what ifs. You know, you'll never know. I mean, you know, maybe the best thing that could have happened was Dave leaving the band, because maybe the band might have just went the other way from there, you know, and folded then, you know. But I mean, we'll never know. But I mean, yeah, you know, it's a natural progression. We can't be Van Halen 1 our whole career, you know, because, you know, you have to evolve you naturally evolve as a band, you know, and bands that try to stick to what worked for them, you know, they kind of get passed up, you know, because it's just the same old thing over and over, you know.
Yeah, last thing on Van Halen, I've said this many times, and I truly believe it. To me, Van Halen's albums, especially the first 4, to me, top to bottom, untouchable records, are as sacred as how, and will be looked back, if not already, they will be soon, in the same way people look back at Led Zeppelin records, in my opinion, that they are timeless.
Hey, that is. Thank you very much for that comment.
Oh, I'm dead serious. I've said that many times. I mean, they are of that stature. They are timeless. They are never not great to hear, production-wise, song-wise, top to bottom, untouchable. And I often wonder, as fans, you know, I'll go back and I'll play Women and Children start to finish, or I'll go back. When was the last time you ever put on an old Van Halen album and listen to it start to finish? Have you done that at any time?
You know what? I do it all the time, and you know, it's really weird. It's really weird, and this doesn't stem from me hoping the band will get back together and tour and whatever. But when I'm home practicing, in fact, this morning I was playing a little while ago, and for some reason I felt I was playing "Everybody Wants Some" and "Somebody Get Me a Doctor." But I'll hit on one of the albums, and I'll go on it, and I'll go, wow, and I jam to it at home. And I mean,
that's awesome.
I love them all, and it's kind of funny because I'll I can't think of anything right off the top of my head, but maybe I'll pull one of the albums up on my where I'm practicing and go, wow, I don't even remember that song, and then it'll be kind of like, okay, I'm going to learn that song again.
I was going to make a bad joke there. I was going to say the reason why you don't remember is because according to Eddie Van Halen, you didn't have anything to do with it.
Well, maybe I should call Eddie up so he could come over here and teach it to me again. Okay, enough of that. You know what? I listen to them all, and and probably the hardest question, or the question that I like to answer the least, if anybody still asks me, is which Van Halen do you like better?
Right.
Because I love it all, man. I love jamming to all of it. I mean, everything, from as simple as Running with the Devil to, some of the Hagar stuff that, I love it all, man.
Outside of the first record, which is just as iconic as it gets, I find myself going to Women and Children a lot from the Roth albums. A song like In a Simple Rhyme on that album, it's just one of the great tracks of all time, and
some
as
good
far
background, some good harmonies on that.
Yeah, who did those? Who did those harmonies?
Well, me, I just screech, so I but and that stuff, and it's the cool thing about the early stuff too is that we didn't have a band that just had one singer that screamed or whatever, and we always, and this is one thing that we always consciously thought of when we wrote. When the early Van Halen songs were being written, whatever, was where can we stick backgrounds in and harmonies and stuff like that, because we just thought it sounded cool, you know, to have a lot of that, and not just have Dave screaming and whatever. So, but I love listening to all of it. I love playing all of it. I'm the guy that'll have a couple drinks, and if I'm somewhere, if I go to Vegas, if I go somewhere and I'm sitting there, I'll get up and I'll jam a song or two with the band that's playing.
Well, I just saw an amazing Van Halen tribute band on the Monsters of Rock cruise that I host called Atomic Punks, and they said you got up with them not too long ago and played a song.
Yeah, they've gone through a couple of changes, and I'm not sure exactly who's in the band now. Obviously Ralph
from Steel Panther.
When I first jammed with him, he was singing with the band, and I got up with him quite a few times. They'd be playing somewhere, and it's kind of funny because I jammed with them once somewhere, and a couple of friends of mine were around the audience, and they were laughing their heads off after the show, and I'm all, well, what's up? And they go, oh, these guys were standing next to me, and they're going, damn, that bass player looks just like Michael Anthony. They couldn't get over it.
Those guys are good, man. Ralph's not in anymore.
There are a few of them out there, but the Atomic Punks are probably one of the Van Halen tribute bands that I've jammed with that really do the material justice.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing to see that. Let me hit you with a couple other things, and I'll let you go.